Hey guys, it's Baron at Backpack, and today we're going to be looking at Smashing the Battle by STUDIOHG. Now, Smashing the Battle is a hack and slash beat 'em up style game where you're playing as a construction worker who's caught up in the middle of a hacker attack in the year 2085. This hacker has turned the build bots against the construction workers, and you, as one of these workers, must do your best to escape by battling through waves of build bots to gain your freedom. Now, Smashing the Battle is, of course, a mobile port of a game that was previously available exclusively in Korea. Now, as I'm sure you've noticed by this point, it's very fan-servicey. Like, really fan-servicey. I mean, the entire game starts out with a title screen where your character is just jumping up and down, for no reason other than to show off their physics. Yeah, physics. Newton would be so proud. Now, to be fair, they actually do quite their due diligence to try and explain why your character's not wearing all that much armor. They go to say that, well, she's wearing emergency armor, so what that means is that, not all of it may fit properly. It's trying to design for everybody, but it doesn't really fit all that well, so not all the pieces are there. A for effort, I suppose. However, that doesn't really explain Lorian or Mary Lucy's costumes, because Lorian is in a similarly revealing costume for no apparent reason, and Mary Lucy is also wearing power armor. To be fair, it is of her own design, but it's still super revealing. So they try, but they don't really explain away everybody, so in the end it's still about, well, looking at girls in scantily clad outfits. It also doesn't help that the background music is reminiscent of 70s porno-style music, which, well, let's be honest, it was probably by design. Well, moving on to gameplay, you play as either Sarah O'Connell or Mary Lucy. Now, Sarah O'Connell, as we talked about, is actually one of the construction workers, whereas Mary Lucy is an independent contractor who came to this crisis trying to show off her suit to get sales for it. In each level, you will try to get through the level as quickly as possible to gain different benefits, while trying to take out all of the build bots along your way. Each of these levels is broken up into various rooms, or in some cases, depending on the game mode, into one room where you have to survive against waves of enemies. During these missions, you also fight boss enemies who are usually just upscaled versions of the enemies you've already fought that do slightly more damage and maybe have a little bit different attack than the others. Now, your basic attack can get you all the way through the game with no problems, especially if you level up your abilities. However, you do have some special abilities that are at your side to help you throughout the game. A lot of these abilities are shared between Sarah and Mary, such as the Magnet ability, which draws all the enemies in a certain area towards it, which can allow you to attack multiple enemies at once and use some of your other abilities to do massive amounts of damage to a lot of enemies. You also have the ability to repair your suit if it gets damaged. If your suit is damaged to the point where it breaks, you won't be able to use your special abilities for a while and you'll be much more vulnerable to attacks. However, don't worry, your suit actually does self-repair after a certain amount of time, and then you get it back and you can continue fighting as normal. Sarah's specific special abilities include the Mine, which allows her to drop a mine somewhere on the field that allows her to do area of effect damage to any enemies that happen to get close enough to it to set it off, as well as the ability to summon a giant wrench that does massive burst damage to anything directly in front of her. Mary Lucy, on the other hand, has the ability to call in a robot to help her fight. In addition, with this robot, if she decides to, she can actually detonate the robot, causing a large area of effect blast that'll hurt enemies caught in the radius. In addition to that, she also has a shield power which blocks incoming projectiles and can keep her safe from some of the suicide bots that will blow up on impact on the shield. Now, it is important to note that the shield does not actually keep enemies from passing through it with the exception of the explosive bots, so you can't use it as a barrier between you and the enemies. They will still be able to hit you. Now, the main ability that both Sarah and Mary share is the ability to go into overdrive mode. Now, overdrive mode involves you losing all your armor and being reduced down to just your bikini, which, of course it does. I mean, why not? Clearly, that's the logical assumption of what overdrive mode would do. But nonetheless, it does give you a huge boost in your power at the expense of course, your defense, because let's face it, bikinis aren't great at deflecting bullets. You do have to be mindful because once you activate overdrive mode, it's stuck like that until the end of the mission, so you do have to pick and choose when you use it, because you could end up being left out in the cold, for multiple reasons, and not being able to defend yourself as well as you'd like. If you ever feel like you're not doing enough damage, or maybe you're taking too much damage, you can always go and upgrade your stat abilities via the main menu. Now, you use the in-game currency, the coins, that you get from beating missions, defeating enemies, destroying supply crates, things like that, and you can use that to upgrade your stats. For instance, get more HP, more SP, more attack, things like that, and They tend to be relatively expensive, but not too bad. For my playthrough, I found that I never really got to a point where I couldn't progress and I had to replay a whole bunch of missions to have enough coins to level up the way I needed to. But you do really skimp in just on the line. So if you didn't choose correctly, maybe you put too many points into something, I could see where you might be in a situation where you probably don't have enough to get through and you're going to have to replay some missions in order to afford to level the character the way you need to. There are also outfits you can unlock for your characters by using scrap. Now you get scrap from defeating enemies and freeing workers that are found throughout the game. These outfits, in addition to being, something aesthetic for your character to wear, you actually do get real in-game bonuses, such as better attack or better SP recharge time by wearing them. So there are benefits to saving up the scrap and buying these, even though really all of them are, for the most part, just a reskin. There are small differences between them, but in general it's just a color palette swap. Now throughout the game you can earn keys by completing missions quickly or completing a certain number of objectives within a mission to earn a key, and sometimes bosses will even drop them. Now you can use these keys to unlock the lore in the game, which gives you more background information about the story, as well as fan art, and we'll talk about that in a bit because there's some interesting things going on with the fan art. And you can also use these keys to, as we said before, unlock the workers, which gives you scrap. Unfortunately, in general, after a while, you find out that the combat is really repetitive. You do the same combos. Yeah, you can switch up between your basic attacks and your specials, but you kind of start comboing the same things by putting down a magnet, then using the giant wrench, or maybe using, the magnet and a mine, things like that. You go through all these different things, and it's just the same thing over and over again. You'll find out that the missions in general are 3 to 4 zones, rooms that connect to each other. You fight through them, you beat a whole bunch of enemies, you go to the next room, and it ends up with a giant boss battle at the end. Every single time. Now, to be fair, there are missions where it's, you have to survive for a certain amount of waves, you have to beat the enemies in a certain time, or get through an area in a certain time. But in general, it's the same thing over and over and over, and with 60 main story missions, it really drags on. Now, I was hoping that when you get to challenge mode, there'd be more of this. I mean, there's 80 challenge missions, right? Well, it is just more of the same. It's the same thing over and over and over, and it gets really boring after a while. They do try to add in some environmental effects to change it up, giant rotating electric batons throughout the map that'll hurt you if you touch them, fire spaces, just kind of places on the map that are on fire that can hurt you if you stand in them too long, and EMP emitters that kind of periodically shock you throughout the level, doing, not a whole lot of damage, like 10 damage, something like that. But, keeping you moving, trying to find where they're at so you can destroy them. Now, these would be really interesting, of course, if they weren't always located in the immediately adjacent room to where you start taking damage, aka Room 2. On the sound side of things, it's actually really good. The musical score, although limited to roughly 4 or 5 songs, including the main title theme, it's actually really fun. There's a lot to it. The funk music, although kind of weird, cheesy, that kind of thing, it's actually pretty well done. There's a lot of depth to it. It's kind of fun sounding, that kind of thing. There's also heavy metal tracks that are really energetic and really kind of get the blood flowing when you're playing games. And there's also a lot of hard rock tracks that really help with the battle scenes that kind of keep them moving and keep it interesting. Yeah! And in terms of the sound effects themselves, they're all pretty good. There's a lot of different varieties of sounds. They use a lot of different sounds for just even hitting. There's multiple sounds for that, so it keeps it different, and it doesn't sound like you're just doing the same thing over and over and over again, which is always good. However, there are some sound effects that do sound a bit strange. For instance, Mary Lucy's attacking sound kind of sounds like your Kirby. Well, if Kirby was wearing a bikini and was wielding a giant hammer. Someone should probably tell DDD about that. Yeah, you're welcome for that image. In general, the game looks pretty good, except it just seems like it's a game that was originally designed to be like on the Xbox 360 arcade, because the graphics aren't up to par with what you would expect for this day and age, even for an indie developer, but they're not terrible, so they're okay, they're not bad. The thing they do just put way too much attention to is the quote-unquote physics. In the 3D part, when your character's just moving around, her breasts are just swinging left and right, side to side, it's kind of unnecessary. Like, they move entirely too much. It's just, clearly this was made just for ogling the girls, and you know what, whatever, but it seems like they could have focused their attention elsewhere. In the main menu, you have the option to hide armor, which I was thinking like, oh, so do I at the very least, does this transfer into the game? No, it really doesn't. It's really meant purely to look at the character in the main menu, because you can zoom in, you can scroll around, and of course, as you might imagine, take a wild stab at where the focal point of the zoom in is. Yep, you guessed it, the breasts. That's right where they are, just right on the boobs, right there. Because, you don't want to zoom in on, the character's face, the character as a whole, it's just focal point. Right there. Yeah. Fun. And the fan art isn't any better because although there are some tamer versions where it's just, the characters, maybe in a heroic pose or something like that, there's also fan art where they're in pretty compromising positions and it's very suggestive. You know what, hey, whatever, you want to be your game, that's fine. But a lot of the other things, you do realize that it just seems like they could have spent this into making a better game. Because it's really repetitive, it tends to be boring after you've played it a while, and yeah, the story's okay, but it's still not great. So they could have spent this effort somewhere else. So now for the ratings. So for gameplay, I'm going to give Smashing the Battle 4 out of 10. For sound, 6 out of 10. Graphics, 5 out of 10. Story, 5 out of 10. And content versus cost, I'm going to give this 4 out of 10 because this game is, well, when I bought it, it was $10 because it was on sale, but it's normally $12. Now, $12 for a decent mobile port, but it's super repetitive and it's just kind of the same thing over and over again. I wouldn't recommend it. Maybe more on the order of like 5 or 6. Either way, it's too much for what you're getting. Overall, I'm going to give Smashing the Battle 4.8 out of 10. Well, if you'd like to ogle some girls, play this game. Anywho, you can go to Steam and you can buy it there. Well, that's it for this review, so if you've enjoyed this review, please leave a like or comment down below, and let me know if there's any other games you'd like me to cover. For a more detailed review of the game, you can go visit my personal blog at bearinabackpack.com, and you can keep up to date with what I'm doing by following me on Twitter. And if you've really enjoyed what you've seen here today, please consider subscribing to my channel to see more reviews like this and other gaming content as it comes out.